Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 120 hours. Yes, I know it's been a while since we were on the stream, but unfortunately I had to cancel on a Friday considering the circumstances and the weather that was coming in, and I'm kind of happy that I did, so I can keep an eye on all of that. And we'll get to that later once we get to the international news, as there is a lot going on, and there will be some more coming up, I'm sure. But if there's a lot of stuff that has happened over the last 120 hours, a lot of it, generally speaking, is not very good stuff. It's a lot of stuff that has to deal with a lot of global crises, whether you're talking about natural disasters or whether you're talking about man-made disasters such as the horrific war inside of Ukraine, or whether you're talking about terrorism throughout the globe. There's just been a lot of pretty bad things. And so what we do here at the New News is we are the news that gives back. 100% of everything we do is charity driven. We do not make a cent and never want to make a cent off of any of the work that we do. And so if you go into the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations down there. All of them, 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, which means they go directly to helping people, with 30% or less going to things like salaries, administration's costs. And we did end up starting our own initiative. It's called Operation Guardian Support, and that is going to be providing non-lethal aid and medical aid to Ukrainian forces as well as Ukrainian medical personnel. And we are cooperating with other nonprofits and NGOs to make some of those logistics happen. So feel free to donate to any of the organizations below, whether it be our initiative or any of the others we have listed. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then of course, one of the biggest things you can do is help us raise our impact, increase the amount of people that come here, see this, or become aware of what is happening in the world around them and what is affecting people all throughout the world, and also to be able to give back to help the people that need it the most. And so thank you very much for everyone that continues to support us, that continues to support the organizations. I really can't say enough. This community has grown significantly since we started. We started at absolute zero here, and this is never an intent of mine to do something like this, and I have found a lot of fulfilling purpose doing this. I really have. It's been an amazing experience. It's a lot of work, but it's been an amazing experience for myself, and I'm sure the rest of the staff team as well, to see what this community has been able to do and continues to be able to do. And we hope to go very far and long with that in the future. And so with that, we get ready to move into the news here. And of course, if you're jumping in the live chat tonight with us, you can feel free to ask questions as we go through the news. I already see some others in there. Of course, we got William Young in there, Rooster, Max, Fair, all of them jumping in are the usuals, of course. Happy to see everybody. And if you do have a question, come in, jump on in, and ask a question as we go through the stream about what's happening. If you are new here, to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I was an O-352 anti-tank missileman, and I served with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. During that time, I did 2 deployments to the Middle East. My first deployment was between October of 2017 through March of 2018. I spent about a month and a half in Kuwait during transit, but the majority of my deployment, about 4.5 months, I spent inside of the country of Syria, specifically in Al-Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor provinces. There I was assisting with Special Operations Forces as part of Operation Inherent Resolve in fighting the Islamic State, as well as providing stabilization efforts there in northeastern Syria and providing aid to local casualties. After that, I redeployed to the United States, I became a corporal, and I ran an armory for about a year and a half, 2 years, for redeploying as a Javelin team leader with once again with the Special Purpose MACDAF and the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. During that time, I ended up spending most of my time in Kuwait during that deployment, but I did go to the U.S. Embassy as one of the 100 Marines that went to the BAKHMUT Embassy complex on New Year's of 2020. During that time, I ended up overseeing all anti-armor operations of the Baghdad Embassy complex, and then I deployed down into Saudi Arabia and trained Saudi Arabian Marines preparing to deploy as part of the coalition to Yemen. After that, came home and ended up getting out of the Marine Corps, and now I work as a logistical coordinator for a motor transportation company. I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, as well as a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training on top of the standard tactical combat casualty care that most Marines are going to receive. And I have provided real-world aid to casualties in the field, mostly, unfortunately, civilians during my time in Syria. So I do have actual experience doing that. I also have interest in other things: history, science, human geography, that kind of thing, geopolitics. But I'm not an expert in any of them. However, I always ask that you as a viewer please do your own research if you have interest in any of these things, because expert or not, it doesn't matter. That research is really the main thing for you guys, is to go through. And if you'd like a starting point, our maps, are including this one tonight, are all available on our website as well. And so with all those wonderful announcements out of the way, as I usually do my spiel there at the beginning of the stream, we can now get immediately into the news. And quite a bit has happened, especially inside of the country of Ukraine, which is the focus of the night. And we have 4 separate updates coming from the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kyiv. And the first one is that more Ukrainians did end up returning home. Quote, on April 3rd, Ukraine returned home 12 Ukrainians from Russian captivity. It's coming from Dmitry Lubinets, who is the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And we do actually get from the Ukrainian Security Services here a video of them recovering those forces. Take a look. And you can see there, not a very long clip. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on to make this happen, and it's kind of a time crunch thing as well when these exchanges occur. But these, you see, obviously, a lot of ambulances there. And there's a reason for that. Keep in mind, a lot of Ukrainian forces that have been captured, that are currently being POWs right now, or were POWs in the past, underwent some very horrific things. POWs undergo very often torture. They're usually deprived of things such as, they usually go through sleep deprivation of any sanitary commodities, standard bathrooms, the ability to wash themselves, that kind of thing. They're also deprived of food. They're deprived of water. Basically, if you are able to be deprived of it, they are deprived of it. It's a really big issue. When it comes to this war, and for any war, is the treatment of POWs. And under the Geneva Conventions, there are a lot of things that specifically cover POWs and the shipwrecked, which goes clear back to the 1899 Hague Conventions, long before the Geneva Conventions that we have now. These are things that were actually overseen, talking over 200, over 100 years at this point, quickly coming up on like 120. So quite a lot of, obviously a lot of issues in doing that kind of thing. Plus, it's just a moral thing, making sure that you're treating other people like people, even if they are prisoners of war. But unfortunately, a lot of people come back, a lot of Ukrainian forces do come back and that were POWs, and they are malnourished. They are in very, very poor health in general, and very much traumatized. And so there's a lot of medical attention that needs to occur immediately, because more than often than not, they're not going to receive any while in captivity. And many of these guys have been in captivity for months. So if you've been on social media, you've probably seen a lot of talk regarding the Ukrainians boycotting and requesting other countries to boycott the Olympics when it comes to Russia's participation. And the reason why is, well, there's many. Of course, they're being invaded by the Russian Federation as we speak, and there's a lot of death and destruction that has come with that. And even though the Olympics has stated that they are not political, they have nothing to do with politics, unfortunately, when you run an international organization, you do. And so a big reason why is just look at the numbers, and it really explains, what what it means to Ukraine to see Russian athletes, many of whom are military personnel participating in the Olympics as part of a team, even under a neutral flag. And that is, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have killed at least 262 Ukrainian athletes. This is coming from Vadim Hutsiet, who is the Minister of Youth and Sports of Ukraine. We do have war crimes and, unfortunately, also the child casualty update, the latest one coming out here. Of course, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 467 Ukrainian children have died, 944 have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, end quote. And that comes from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Additionally, they say that, quote, during the occupation, Russian invaders committed more than 9,000 war crimes in the Bucha district of the Kyiv region. And keep in mind, this is the one-year anniversary of the Bucha massacre. And this is something that has scarred many of us. I mean, I can't imagine for Ukrainians. It was really tough to just look at that and go through that. And, you know, having to re-go through that to make the 1 year in Ukraine video, which it was just... You can't see these things and report on these things and talk about these things without becoming emotionally affected by these things, because there's some kind of, you know, you have some kind of investment into these things, and to see the utter lack of care for human life, it goes far beyond even what I have seen, and that's to say a lot. You know, you talk about Syria, you know, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And they were, you know, carpet bombing villages. I mean, we would go through on patrols in Syria, and there'd be villages just flattened by Assad and the Russians. And it was just, you can't describe it if you've never seen it in person. Not in videos, not in photos, but to see it in person. And the level of devastation that we have seen in Ukraine, and especially the horrific atrocities of Bucha and Irpin and Hostomel and all of the places throughout, you know, Mariupol. I mean, Mariupol is going to be a scale that is you cannot comprehend those numbers. And yeah, you can't, it doesn't come close. I mean, my experiences cannot come close to what has happened here. And it's absolutely devastating. I mean, there's no good way to put it outside of that. I mean, those images are just something you cannot forget. Quote, during the occupation, Russian forces killed 1,374, including 38 children, and injured 34 Ukrainian citizens in the Kyiv region. In addition, 280 people are reported missing, end quote. And that comes from Andriy Nebyatov, who is the head of the National Police of the Kyiv region. Coming from Andrei Kusta's team, we can see here, like this photo alone, obviously you can see just body bags in lines. I mean, watching them rebury the dead is just... This is, you know, just about a month under occupation. Over 1,400 killed. Over 9,000 crimes over 33 days of occupation, to include the indiscriminate shelling, murder, mass looting, sexual violence and gender-based violence, and torture.
Київщина – це перший регіон, з якого сили оборони вигнали ворога, який звільнили від російського окупанта. Після звільнення Київщини ми вперше побачили справжнє звіряче обличчя режиму, який десятиріччями стверджував, ніби є цивілізованим. Мабуть, вперше російські окупанти побачили світ відносно близький географічно, але настільки відмінний ціннісна та світоглядна. І як справжні варвари взялися знищувати та розграбовувати його. Тоді, завдяки звитязі сил оборон України, атака була відбита. Ці бої змінили перебіг війни, врятували Київ та всю країну. Наш обов'язок як представників закону – відновити справедливість. Для цього ми маємо спільно відбудувати пошкоджену агресором міжнародну архітектуру справедливості. Відповідь на питання притягнення до відповідальності російських злочинців – це відповідь на запитання. А в якому світі житимуть наші діти? Ще раз, не тільки українці в Україні, а всі наші діти, які хочуть жити в цивілізованому світі. Не маємо права допустити безкарності за злочини російського режиму. І необхідною умовою для цього є індивідуальна відповідальність найвищого військового та політичного керівництва країни-агресора за найтяжчі міжнародні злочини. Ми одностайні в тому, що це жахіття не повинно повторитися ні в Україні та ніде в світі.
So that is actually the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. And I saw another video, and it's worth, I mean, it might be worth even finding it again. But President Zelensky was asked, what was the most frightening, what has been the most frightening point of the war for him? And hands down, he said Bucha. Single word, Bucha. I mean, and if you look at every single person, every key political figure that has ever been to Bucha, they say the exact same thing. Because they took him, you know, they took them around. They went and looked at the mass graves. And they went and they looked at the destroyed buildings and all of the destroyed pieces of equipment just lying throughout the entirety of the streets. The bodies sometimes still laying in the streets when they arrived. You know, Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union. I mean, you're talking about every political official that has gone there has been, every time you see the video of them going to Bucha, it is an emotionally impactful experience for anyone going there. This is not the first time world leaders, of any of them, as world leaders, have had to deal with and see levels of death and destruction. They have to make those decisions as leaders. Whether you're talking about for the United States, whether you're talking about for the United Kingdom, anyone that has been in the war on terror has had to deal with these choices that have humongous, insurmountable ramifications on what happens next. And every single one of them, we're physically, visually able to see the impact of going to the utter and complete devastation of that city. The complete lack for care of basic human decency and dignity and life. $4,396 children have been confirmed as kidnapped by Russia. Ukrainian government submitted a list of 4,396 missing children who have been tracked to have been deported into Russia. The list only includes orphans, half-orphans, and those deprived of parental care. Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk, who has urged Russians not to adopt Ukrainian children who were stolen in Ukraine during the war and deported to Russia. The real number of children who have been forcibly deported to Russia is impossible to establish, but right now it is estimated to be over 14,000. Some estimates put it upward to 16,000 children. These are the confirmed ones. But 16,000 children. To put that into perspective, I live in a pretty decent sized city. Average population between, upwards of anywhere from 40 to 60,000. There's not, in all of the 4 or 5 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, well, now 1 high school, there are not 16,000 children in the school system where I am from. In the entire metropolitan area, there are not 16,000 children. It is impossible to fathom that. We continue on, moving from the capital. And we reached Kharkiv, where a mass missile and rocket attack, as well as drones, were used and centered on Kharkiv. A quote: on the night of March 31st, Russian forces attacked Ukraine with S-300 missiles and Shahed-136 drones. In particular, Russian occupiers launched 9 missiles at civilian infrastructure of Kharkiv, and Russian troops also launched 10 Shahed-136 drones at Ukrainian territory. Ukrainian defenders shot down 9 enemy UAVs. And that's coming from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Quote: on March 31st, Russian troops fired 9 S-300 missiles at Kharkiv. Local private residential buildings were damaged. 3 people were injured. Also, an enemy drone has hit a critical infrastructure facility in Izium district of the region. 2 civilians were injured. And that's coming from Oleh Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Jumping down here further south, we move into the Donetsk and Luhansk areas, where we see a very significant amount of the fighting that is currently ongoing here at the front lines. And this is where the rubber meets the road, really, for the war itself. Starting off here with our area here in the Donbass, we actually come to Pavel Kolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He said, quote: on April 2nd, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 6 killed, 15 injured. This came out at 8 a.m. local time this morning from his office and was posted both Ukrainian and in English. 6 people were killed and 9 injured in Kashnivka, 3 in Bakhmut. 3 people in Bakhmut were injured, 1 in Toretsk, 1 in Volodar, and 1 in Kalinivka. So far, since the beginning of the invasion on February the 24th of 2022, 1,446 civilians have been killed, with an additional 3,336 having been injured. Now, this only covers areas that are currently in Ukrainian-held territory. This does not include areas such as Volnovakha, the city of Donetsk itself, or Mariupol, which all reside in occupied area. Mariupol alone, we know that tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians have been killed as a result of the siege in that battle for the city and the subsequent lack of humanitarian aid. Druzhkivka ended up receiving shelling. At least 1 person was injured. Several different attacks did occur. They ended up striking apartment buildings, schools, and even a bank, as well as some shopping areas. You can see some of the destruction here, some of the craters that have occurred. And you can see just all of the mud and everything thrown up here, and the shrapnel, which has just punched its way through all the windows. Kashnivka received a very, very terrible attack. Initially, it was reported that 3 dead and 6 wounded. That has officially increased. So far, 6 people were killed, and with an additional 8 wounded, possibly a 9th. After Russian forces launched another bombardment against the city center of Kostanivka, apartment complexes around the area received the majority of the damage. Coming from Pavel Kolenko, we get these photos, and some of these photos will repeat as other agencies and individuals in the government are also posting them, so as a forewarning. You can see here some of the destruction there amongst the apartment building. Craters, of course, continuing. Once again, more destruction amongst the apartment building. You see this one is just completely leveled. I mean, it's just, that building is gone. Coming from Amin Dzepper, who is the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine. Once again, posting same images. Ministry of Defense for Ukraine. 16 apartment buildings, 8 private houses, a kindergarten, and administrative buildings were all damaged. And so we get this photo again, but this is the telling one. We continue to see that image repeated over and over again in different places. And it don't mean, you know, like it's the same. No, it is the same thing happening over and over and over again. Brings us to Bakhmut. Now, there's a lot happening around Bakhmut. There's been a lot of talk back and forth as to where we're sitting here in the battle for Bakhmut. And the situation is not very clear, if to be very frank with you as the audience. Battles are very fluid. War is very fluid. Think of it like water in a glass. It sloshes back and forth and settles, and it, you know, every time you move it, it's not stagnant. It's not simple. A lot of people don't understand the complexity of war. That's fine. You probably shouldn't understand the complexity of war. That's probably for the better. But the situation around Bakhmut is very tenuous. It's not. It's very fluid. It's very difficult to understand. And the reason why it's so difficult to understand is for several key reasons. Reason number one, the battle for Bakhmut right now is surrounded with operational security. The situation is not good for either side, and neither side really wants to talk about how bad the situation is. They would much rather, paint it in a relatively good light for themselves. No matter who you're talking to. Keep in mind, there's an information war going on simultaneously besides this one. Besides the physical one. Reason number two, war is complicated. And what we're seeing is counterattacks and other, counterattacks of the counterattacks and, advances, offensives, defensive actions, blocking. We're seeing all sorts of different little things going on around Bakhmut. And what it boils down to is it is street to street, house to house, room by room, building by building fighting in the rubble of whatever is left of Bakhmut. It is absolutely some of the most brutal fighting you will see anywhere. This type of warfare is called MOUT. It's called Military Operations in Urbanized Terrain, is what it stands for. And urban fighting is some of the most difficult and brutal fighting you can ever commit to in warfare. The only thing more desperate than fighting in an urban setting is an amphibious assault against a well-defended beachhead. That is the only thing more desperate in military action than urban fighting. Now, you see urban fighting a lot. Obviously, you've seen it if you follow the war on terror. A lot of major actions. What you don't realize is that for a military planner, and this is even for small unit leadership tactics, all the way up to generals and stuff having to do this type of planning when they're writing their orders, they're writing their 5-paragraph order, and they're taking in these assessments. They are planning when you assault a urban area and you are preparing to do military operations, especially this large scale military operations in urban terrain, you are anticipating at a minimum 80% casualties. You are anticipating that 80% of the troops that you send into action in an urban area will become either killed, wounded, captured, or missing. That is before you even begin your offensive actions. That is saying everything goes right. We should only take 80% casualties. And that is from an American perspective on when you're planning these types of operations. This fighting is, everything is going wrong. Casualty rates in Bakhmut are probably never going. There will be times, just like occasionally they still find like a dugout from World War I in France that still has people trapped inside of it. They will probably be finding similar situations in the fields around Bakhmut. It is absolutely horrific. And the fighting here is very brutal. It's very close quarters, very intense. And we're seeing a lot of attempts to try and undermine resolve. And part of that undermining of resolve is the legally taking of Bakhmut. This is something that is being pressed quite heavily when it comes to the Russian forces, specifically from the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is a private military corporation, or PMC, that was started by Yevgeny Prigozhin, who actually used to be a caterer for Putin and high-level military and government officials. Hence the nickname Putin's Chef. Yevgeny Prigozhin in 2014 founded the Wagner Group. Noticed a lot of things happened around 2014, considering that would be when Russia first invaded Ukraine. And so he has, and this has been pretty verified, of they planted a flag on top of the city hall. And so this is Yevgeny Prigozhin in night vision. This is coming from RT, or Rossiya Today, is what it stands for. Rossiya Today is a Russian state-owned media network. If anyone tries to tell you different, then I am so sorry for you, but it doesn't take much. A quick wiki search will let you know why. But we continue nonetheless. This is Yevgeny Prigozhin, the old man himself, who is trying to plant this flag here. Take a look.
2 апреля, 23:00 ровно. Сзади меня здание городской администрации. Это российский флаг. Владлену Татарскому написано «Добрая память» на этом флаге. Юридически мы взяли Бахмут. И командиры подразделений, которые брали администрацию и весь центральный квартал, понесут и поставят эти знамена. Знамя ЧВК «Вагнер». Это эти парни брали Бахмут. Юридически он наш. В западных кварталах остался противник. 2 апреля, 23:00. Давайте, ребят.
And now we get to see where this is at. So Yevgeny Prigozhin was located roughly here. This is the city of Bakhmut. He was located roughly here when they were taken, or when this was taken. The city of Bakhmut is under some pretty intense fighting on pretty much every angle. It's a near encirclement. It's not a complete encirclement. Now, if you notice, our map does not necessarily reflect what that map was showing. There's a reason for that. A lot of maps are going to be put out there by a lot of different people. Some of them have a lot of really good resources. Some of them don't. Some of them are there to sway opinion. Some of them are there to try and state facts. And usually when it comes to warfare, it's somewhere in the middle. Until we can get some kind of hardened proof as to where this stuff is taking place, usually by geolocation, then we're able to actually pinpoint on the map and we move our map accordingly. And occasionally we have to cross-reference because there's some catching up to do. As any organization, there's not one single organization that is going to know everything that is going on if you're trying to look at this from an independent source. So please, when it comes to the battle maps and when it comes to a representation, it is to give you an idea of what's happening on the ground. And while we try to pride ourselves in how close it can be in accuracy, it does not always directly reflect what is happening in reality. but it is the safest path that we are willing to take to try and make sure we're bringing you the most accurate stuff we can. This is very complicated. There's a lot of things that are rumors. There's a lot of things that are not. And so we are trying to stick with what we know is fact. So I appreciate you guys for kind of bearing with it on that. And I understand that we still have yet to move this, despite we know that there are a lot of things that have changed around Bakhmut. But our evidence and what we have seen does not give us good enough locations and good enough kind of referencing to show us what significant changes have been made. We continue down here into Avdiivka, where we see at least one dead and one injured as a result of shelling on Avdiivka, which receives pretty much near constant bombardment. Several shelling incidents over the past several days have left at least one person wounded and 2 injured in total. These photos coming out from Pavlikolenko. Unfortunately, a city bus was hit. See additional, more cultural things also being hit, including the cultural gardens here. Coming down here into Melitopol. The railway depot has been struck several times over the past week now. The railways are very key junctions for Russian supply lines through Melitopol, as it's very centralized locations, and they appear to continue to receive strikes from Ukrainian forces as of late. The railway depot was attacked again several times in a week now. This is coming from... This is RIA Novosti, which is actually a subsidiary of RT, for those who don't know. RIA Novosti, if you actually read about like Russian media networks, and I've kind of gone over this before, RT and TASS both are pretty much like the overall major government-run agencies. They actually, TASS is the oldest of the two. Russia Today is actually formed from Soviet times, but TASS is actually from Imperial Russia. That was then transferred under the Soviets, and then it was then transferred once again in 1991 under Boris Yeltsin, where it's kind of been renamed several times over today, or up until what we see today. RIA Novosti, as well as several others, Rupoli, for instance, are all subsidiaries of the RT network, or Russia Today, while TASS just kind of runs their own thing. And that's what they call. But there are many different organizations. Many of them are all funded by Russia Today. And there is one that is considered to be independent in Russia. It is funded and it is owned by Gazprom, which is its parent company. It's a subsidiary of Gazprom. And Gazprom is a majority government-owned organization. So it is the illusion of choice in Russia when it comes to the news that you're receiving. Just to make that very clear, if you read into this stuff and you're trying to read Russian news sources, keep in mind it is an illusion of choice. It's not so much as different news sources. It's all the same organizations. It's all government-run organizations or government-affiliated organizations, and they just have different names and different logos. They're all owned by the same people. So this is coming from RIA Novosti. That's their logo. Take a look. We can see here, explosions coming in. That cat is running for its life. It is terrified. See once again here. Huh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And also on top of that, what we see is another collaborator explodes. This time is Gulyatar Maxim Zubarev. Zubarev was a member of the local Communist Party prior to the war and actively sided with Russia after the invasion. So we have yet more partisans eliminating collaborators. I just want to note, for most countries in the world, you don't have to advertise how good you are as a country on billboards. And that is who they ended up killing. So, kind of going back here and into the comments and the live chat here, because I see that we have some questions and something I didn't know. Rooster Roboto asks, is Russia at a disadvantage in Bakhmut? There are advantages and disadvantages in Bakhmut. Generally speaking, Russia is on the overall disadvantage. Russia is on the overall disadvantage in several key aspects. And so that disadvantage comes down to really two big things, and that is equipment. Russian forces, generally speaking, their equipment and training is very lackluster. They do not maintain that image that they had prior to the war kicking off. Very obviously, their image as a military power has been significantly, pretty much obliterated in every sense of the word. They're dragging out T-55s and T-54s. To give you an idea, when the T-54, T-55 was first designed, the prototype rolled off the line while Hitler was still alive. So, not exactly a good look. Second big thing. The second big thing is the fact that Russia is on the offensive overall, operationally. And that is a very key thing to note, because whenever you are an attacking force, whenever you're on the offensive, you are going to receive more casualties. The Kharkiv counteroffensive, while very successful back in September, it was very successful, but because Ukraine went on the offensive, they took significantly more casualties. And we saw a lot of casualties as a result. I mean, one of the very first things that we saw of the counteroffensive, the first thing that we knew that there was a counteroffensive going on, is actually when they were pushing there on Balaklia, we saw that they had set up a field hospital, in a warehouse. And we saw the amount of casualties that were pouring in from the front as Ukrainian forces are launching this massive counteroffensive. Now, could have been significantly worse, but that's quite the sign of, they're on the offensive. Their casualty rates, generally speaking, you're looking at, and this is a very oversimplification, there is actually graphs and things you can go and look up on how to do this. I recommend looking at the Love's Doctrine from the United Kingdom on this, because I think that one is more or less the more accurate of them. But the U.S. has their own. I just can't find it at this point in time. And casualties is actually a science, but generally speaking, you can assume that Ukrainian forces are going to take 2/3 of the casualties that the Russians are while on the defensive. Which is what they are here in Bakhmut. The Ukrainians are very, very much on the defensive in Bakhmut. And they're in an urbanized setting. So they're better trained. So Ukrainian forces are better trained, better equipped. Generally speaking, they're in the defensive position, and they're in an advantageous position inside of an urban setting. Generally speaking, that's a recipe for a pretty long-standing success. You look at the Battle of Mariupol and how long they lasted, completely surrounded with minimal resupply. And then eventually no resupply. So to say these troops who still have openings and still have ways into the city to get resupplied, to continue that fighting, is a significant thing. It's a significant piece. And a lot of people have asked, why wouldn't the Ukrainians retreat from here? And I read something that was just an offhand comment that actually made a lot of sense. And I didn't think about this before I saw that comment, but the more I start thinking about it, the more it does make sense. A lot of people have said Ukraine is holding Bakhmut for political reasons. That could be 100% possible. I mean, 100% it is possible Ukraine could be putting a lot of troops into here for a major political reason. That's acceptable in the world of the war and fighting in a war is the terrible end of diplomacy, and of politics is what it boils down to. You are literally the tip of the spear of political capability. That is what warfare is: imposing your will on another group of people by force. Well, when you're looking at Bakhmut, part of it is political. Because of the things that have been said about Bakhmut, it's very symbolic at this point. But a major key factor here that got me thinking is the fact that, think about where we're at in the year. Ukrainian forces are getting martyrs. They're getting the Cougar MRAPs. They're getting the Strikers. They're getting the Bradleys. They're getting the Challengers, the Leopards. Many of them have been delivered. The Patriots are coming in for more air defense systems. They're getting more MiG-29s. They're getting more NATO standard equipment. They're getting more and more ammunition. But how many Strikers are you seeing on the front lines? How many Leopards are you seeing on the front lines? Or Challengers? Or Martyrs? Not a lot, if any. They're trained on the systems. They know how to use them. They've been integrated with their air assault corps. They know what is they have the equipment. They know how to use it, and they've trained with it, and they're able to do it. That means that is in preparation for a counteroffensive. This is the anticipated counteroffensive. If you look at what's happened in the Donbass, we're in the Rasputitsa season again. It's snowed heavily today and over the weekend, but these are being held in reserve. These are being prepared to drive a spear through the Russian lines somewhere. Whether that's Luhansk, whether that's Donetsk, whether that's in Zaporizhia, whether that's across the river in Kherson, don't know. But the longer Ukrainian forces hold in Bakhmut, and if they can hold until the ground is solid enough that this equipment is effective and can be used effectively in combat, then that means that Russian forces, once that offensive starts, they don't have any reserves anywhere. They've been pouring troops and equipment in reserve into Bakhmut. Okay? They are fighting and holding in a stalemate up here in the Luhansk Oblast, near Kreminna, and to the north, near Svatove. They're in a stalemate. They tried counteroffensives. They failed. Ukrainians are trying to press the offensive. Not enough real oomph to do it. Making small gains, but not really anything worth noting. And it's pretty much stalemated. Bakhmut has been a stalemate since June of last year. The Russians have poured in massive amounts of troops and equipment, and they are now pretty much out of reserves. The front is stalemated. And so if Ukrainian forces, remember I had talked about this before, Russian forces were able to fix massive amounts of Ukrainian troops in on Bakhmut that allowed them to maneuver elsewhere. Now, the shoe is on the other foot. Now, the Russians have poured in the reserve troops that could be used to fill gaps in the line somewhere else if there was a breakthrough, and they're currently trying to slug it out with Ukrainian forces in the absolute deplorable and decrepit areas around Bakhmut. So that way, when the time comes, when the ground hardens and these units can actually maneuver the way that they're supposed to maneuver and operate, they can punch a hole in the line, and the Russians don't have anything to fill the gap. Otherwise, they have to pull from Bakhmut, or they have to pull from Kreminna, or they have to pull from Zvatove, and then they can punch. Then the Ukrainians could punch a hole there instead. So that makes a lot of sense. I saw that, and it makes a lot of sense. Book 40 says, saw a source today that Ukraine has formed 3 army corps of 20,000 each. Wonder what they're going to be used for. Well, probably a counteroffensive, but I don't know if it's full corps. We have seen them use quite a significant amount of, or we have seen them form several additional air assault brigades, and what they just are calling in general assault brigades, which appear to be the ones that are getting this newer equipment and preparing, while veteran units that have been fighting the Russians already kind of have this stuff down. As they're getting rotated out, they're forming the NCO corps of these new brigades, that experience, while also the more veteran units that have the equipment already that they are supposed to and are fighting on the front lines. They've been doing this a while, and they're holding the line until that counteroffensive comes. You're going to use your nice new NATO troops with NATO equipment, NATO-trained troops with NATO equipment against the Russians in a counteroffensive. Let the guys that have been holding the line for a while now keep holding the line until that day comes. You don't want to bust up your shiny new toys as soon as you get them. The Book of 40 says, I don't think Russia has defense in depth. They do, but it's not very good. Have you seen them dig trenches? They don't know how to dig trenches. Okay, trench warfare has been a thing since, the Civil War. For the United States, there are instances of World War I style warfare in the Civil War in the United States in the 1860s. Of course, you had everyone fighting in World War I. You'd think trench building would be as, it's basic knowledge. I know how to fight. I know how to dig a fighting position. I know how to dig fighting positions for a machine gun, for a rifle, shallow trench, deep trench. I know how to dig saber trenches, javelin trenches. I know how to dig trenches and fighting positions for literally anything. Damn near. I could dig a mortar position if I wanted to, which is then just extend it out if it needs to be an artillery position, because I've had to do it. It's not hard. It's very basic infantry fundamentals to do these things. These guys don't know how to dig trenches correctly. And I get everyone trying to put them in a tree line, but the objects to get below the ground, tree lines are great until they all get blown up. Trench 101. Not particularly hard. Literally, there's I swear, every single book on that bookshelf has something about digging trenches or defensive position. I swear to it. There's something in every single one of those books about putting equipment this manual right here. This manual has nothing to do with employment. Nothing to do. And I'm pretty sure I can still find something about employment in the defense in this. Let's see here. Contents continue. Operator maintenance, distribution, ammunition, probe missile, supporting information, scopes, regulations, field manuals. Missile, Justin Genner's platform, Cougar MRAP. Sorry, I want to see if there's anything. I want to see if I am correct on this. Operator restrictions. General information. Oh, look at that. So establishing target reference points. Wow, look at that. This thing doesn't even have anything to do with employment at all. 100% of this book here is just this is an operator maintenance manual, and it tells me how I can establish TRPs, or target reference points, for engaging targets in a defense. Like, this is supposed to tell me how to fix things that are broken. Nothing to do with actually, like, employing the weapon system. Like, it's just, like, it's an operator maintenance manual. Operator maintenance manual. Fix thing broken. Still tells me how to operate in a defense in some fashion. Establishing tower reference points for the quickest one I could find. So, you know, Rooster, Trench 101, it's everywhere. Like, if you have any basic level of fundamentals of, like, warfare, Trench 101. I've cleared so many trenches in training. I have dug so many fighting positions. I have set up so many posts. I have done more of that than I think I have anything else in my entire career, except for maybe standing in useless formations waiting to go on Libo. Looking forward here, our manual's being updated when it comes to drone warfare. An open trench is not a viable defense position anymore. Well, that's the thing. A lot of the defensive positions aren't viable anymore, but that doesn't stop you from putting them because it's better than nothing. So, drone warfare isn't new. It's newer, but it's not necessarily new. And I'm not talking about, you know, Predator drones and stuff from, you know, the mid-2000s when they were the big thing. I'm talking little quadcopters. One of the biggest threats, and the threat that I faced at the very beginning of my deployment in Syria, was quadcopter drones. They were horrifically difficult to shoot down, which is why I learned that if you, and for any Ukrainian troops that may be listening to this, if you're not looking to capture and use the drone, something you can do is if you take your PEC laser, your little laser lights on the front of your rifle, and if the blue screw is out, because the blue safety screw should be out if you're actually using it to employ, if you turn it all the way on for the IR setting and you point it at a drone, if you actually hit the camera of the drone, it will burn out the reticle. So it'll actually burn out the camera on the drone, and then it will lose its ability to track or the operator to see what's going on, and it will eventually crash. This is something that we learned from the Islamic State, who constantly started to use these things. And except that what Ukraine has done is they've taken, and what both sides, I should say, have done, and something that everyone is looking at is, this was a threat that arose primarily with the Islamic State, you know, coming up with using cheap $15, you know, Amazon drones and hooking grenades to them, and they would actually fly them over posts and drop hand grenades on posts. Now, I never had that personally happen to me in that kind of a setting. There was one time I had an armed drone, and it was about 300 meters from my position, and it short-circuited it in the grenade, and the drone detonated in the middle of the desert. That's the closest I ever came to that. But still, usually used for observation and can be armed. And this was a threat in 2017, 2018, and it was a threat that we were expecting and trained for even prior to that. 2016 is when I actually got into the Corps. So, but it was a threat even before then. My seniors who had done those deployments had trained for it as well. What the Ukrainians have done is they've taken that and they've industrialized it, and they've improved upon the basic idea of what these drones could be capable of, and they have made it to where it's an effective, realistic battlefield implement instead of just something that is more or less an improvised thing. And you see a rapid development of that starting at the very beginning of the war, where it's pretty much an ISIS drone at the beginning of the war, and you're now seeing ready-made, purpose-built systems 100% designed to do this, many of it using very cost-effective, cheap things such as 3D printing to make the systems for it. And some of these drones now, Australia for instance, are purposely designing drones that are capable of delivering punishing payloads using these systems. So this is something that while Ukraine and Russia specifically are testing these theories, but the rest of the world is watching, and we have been watching. But we never thought it would get to this point, and now it's gone from something that is more or less for, you know, a cheap method for extremists to now something that may be viable for your average infantry squad which the Marine Corps in its 2030 force design actually intends to have a drone operator inherent to the squad, which is one of the reasons why they do the force design changes in the Marine Corps specific. So it's intended to have a squad drone operator. This could now become something that is more and more effective and has a meaningful role for infantry units to stay relevant in the modern day battlefield, and to stay situationally aware. So it's a very important thing. It's a very complex issue, and there's a lot of more research and a lot more development that needs to happen before it can become super effective, I think. But what we've seen out of Ukraine is the premise is there of it being effective. It's not one-off, small instances of ISIS, dudes in the desert flying drones and dropping grenades on top of American posts. It is now a viable thing for an infantry squad to have a drone, possibly armed, possibly reconnaissance, possibly different types, or to have dedicated drone units specifically for these types of missions. And I think it's something that is definitely worthwhile. And I'm very impressed to see Ukraine taking that leap forward and looking at the drones from, as making a unit specifically designed to operating these things in a new 21st century warfare style setting, despite some of the setbacks that we see in Ukraine and some of the things that we see out of Ukraine that isn't what we, anticipated when it comes to modern 21st century warfare based on what we saw during the War on Terror. I hope that answered your question. And the other thing, finally getting to the thing that I did not know, supposedly, according to Book 40, supposedly since the start of the war, while digging trenches, the bodies of roughly 1,700 German soldiers from World War II have thus far been found. I did not know that, but I would not be surprised. Obviously, Ukraine was a pretty heavy battleground during World War II for a lot of different activities, whether it was partisan activities, whether it was the Nazis, whether it was the Soviets. There's just a ton of things in Ukraine. And once again, ramifications that will last generations. If you're finding dead troops, you're going to find unexploded ordnance too. We actually move over here and into Odessa, where a city was hit by several Shahed 136 drones tonight. Though it's thought that 15 kamikaze drones were launched to attack Odessa. 11 are reportedly shot down, with 2 hitting targets so far. And one of the explosions is believed to be the location of a very large grain terminal there in the city of Odessa.
Твою мать. Третий раз на том же месте взрывается.
Unfortunately, that's a little bit of a newer development, so we'll have to probably come back to that on Wednesday's stream to really hit hard on it. Book 40 with another question. Do you think they will reach a breaking point where using a drone is so useless due to countermeasures? Individually, maybe. Now, there are certainly developments, but the thing is that in warfare, that's not developed yet. We have a new tool, and we've tried to make counters. I mean, you've seen all those fancy, looks like some sci-fi weapon, drone gun that brings down drones. And they're somewhat effective, of course, but when you're talking about the threat isn't necessarily single one-off drones. Single one-off drones are great for things like reconnaissance, or if you're doing things like the Switchblade drone, which I had some friends who were lucky enough to go to that course. The Switchblade drone, loitering munitions like that, that's something that you really can't stop. It's not easy to stop these kinds of things. And it's not like a quadcopter. And most of the quadcopters we're seeing are commercially designed, and so they're not purpose-built by the military to meet certain specifications. It is what is available. Another key thing is that going back a little bit to my original point, one-off drones are better for reconnaissance, not so much for actual engagement when you're talking about quadcopters. So there's different SOPs and stuff to bring them down. And there's certainly certain things that work better than others. But the key thing is that the threat isn't single drones. This threat is swarms. This is something that the U.S. Navy is especially worried about because swarm attacks are very difficult to engage, even with things like the CWIS or the close-in weapon system. The CWIS can only track so many targets at a time. It's originally designed to take down ballistic missiles, and it would take extensive amounts of upgrades and armament in order to counter a large drone swarm attack. It's the same premise of using a large amount of boats, which is something that we had been looking at when it came to Iran using inside of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. So the single drone is a threat, but the bigger threat, and the one that would actually be more catastrophic, is to use them in a large swarm-style attack, using many, many drones, dozens, if, a dozen, if not several dozen, upwards of over 100 drones possibly, all synced together for an initial attack would actually overwhelm pretty much any air defense system that you can come up with at this point in time. And so, just like anything else, you have developments trying to counter each other. We came up with the Russians came up with certain systems, with how their autoloaders were operating and everything else, and their numbers of their tanks. The U.S. came up with the TOW missile, and they also came up with the Javelin for anti-tank warfare, because single charge warheads weren't going to beat the tank armor anymore. You see that continue to escalate. They improved the slope armor. Then they also put ERA on there. Okay, so now we have to have tandem charge warheads. Okay, but now the systems, once you fire that missile, the operator has to sit there and operate the and actually has to stay on target until he actually impacts the tank. Well, that gives the tank the ability to see that giant signature from his backblast, and so now the tank can now turn its turret and fire off a round. Okay, making a fire and forget missile allows the crew to immediately displace, hence the Javelin. And that battle will continue to rage far into the future. Okay, ERA isn't effective anymore, and they're working on something called XRA, which is energized reactive armor. It's using electricity in plating to destroy incoming projectiles instead of what you are seeing now. Or also the trophy system, if you're American, or the Arena CAS, if you're looking at Eastern main battle tanks, such as the T-90. T-90M is supposed to have what's called the Arena CAS system, close-in air defense system, and it has yet to really prove its worth. But the trophy system, we know, at least can work. Even if it's not 100% effective, it's better than nothing. So you're going to have a constant battle going back and forth. And we're not at the point of the drones are still in that development phase now, and so you're not going to see a lot of really good counters until they've actually reached that industrialized, specified capability that militaries are going to start adopting and establish, which is almost guaranteed, especially once this war is over and all of the guys sitting in the Pentagon and elsewhere are able to go and look at it and start coming up with their outrageous budget plans. But that is it for everything inside of the country of Ukraine. But that's not everything that has to deal with Ukraine or that is currently going on in the world. There's plenty of other stuff. We should start off up here in the country of Belarus, where Belarus is prepared to deploy Russian strategic nuclear weapons within its territory. The Russian ambassador to Belarus has stated that nuclear weapons in the country will begin to be moved to its western border towards Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia.
NATO has been deploying its troops in eastern part of the bloc at an increasingly accelerated pace. It currently has more than 21,000 troops in Poland and the Baltic states. They are preparing to invade Belarus, to destroy our country. They are doing this with fugitive militants, bandits from our nation for whom they don't feel any pity. We have obtained this information. They get their initial experience in Ukraine. They are being used as cannon fodder. NATO.
I just want you to know that as as an American who has, been, worried about near peer threats and stuff like that, I've never once, as like an adversary, like thought of like Belarus as like a major like entity, like at all. Like it was Russia and China, China, and Iran. Like that was the big three for me in my time. Now things have probably definitely changed, but like Russia, China, Iran, those are your big three in that order at the time. Now that order may have flipped now, where it's now China, Russia, Iran, because Iran honestly is peanuts. But Belarus of all, I just consider Belarus Russia at this point. They're in a union, so I mean they are technically one in the same country. This is Lukashenko's too lazy to do anything, including make a flag for it. But never once have I, as as in a military like mindset, ever thought about like fighting Belarus. Like I don't care. I do not care about Belarus. Would be a footnote in history if it really came down to it. Like it would be just another like Minsk. Like I never thought about Lukashenko really before this war. Like outside of like hearing about like the bad things he did, like the lady that he literally got abducted for the Olympics because she didn't want to go back and stuff like that. Like I never really thought about Lukashenko and his regime and like fighting Belarus from like a military perspective. This never really crossed my mind. I just never heard the word Belarus in like any kind of briefing or training event or anything like that. Russia, China, Iran, Belarus. No one cares about you. No one cares about you as like a dictatorship. No one is threatening you because no one cares enough to threaten you. What only people care about is your big daddy Russia. And it's not even that big of a big daddy anymore. It's just kind of a sad sack and a shell of what it once was. Fair says, but don't the Spec Op videos scare you? You know who posts... You know what? I'm pretty sure North Korea makes better propaganda videos than Belarus does. And that's saying something. That's saying something. I'm pretty sure North Korea makes better propaganda videos than Belarus. Belarus is so low budget that I could probably get get something together here that would probably be better in quality. Period. Like I could probably make something, and I've made one actual YouTube video. Everything else is streams. So, no, I'm not entirely scared. That's cool. You can punch a brick and you can punch things while you're, have, like, a bunch of, like, smoke grenades going off around you. That's cool. Hey, watch me as I, like, thank you for everyone getting in a group. That now makes my life really easy because now all I have is Enflamed Fire, which is a machine gunner's wet dream. Now, I put this as 18 plus because it's got some, it does have some brutality, for animal brutality especially. But hatred is being taught in schools. And so what we're seeing here is new conversations about what matters lessons. So this is with Russian military personnel, which is aiming at radicalizing the youth there in Russia. And so we've seen this before. This is coming from the Nizhny Novgorod, where school children were shown a slaughtered pig that was wrapped in the Ukrainian flag in order to teach the children the fate of Ukraine. Russia has been radicalizing children for a long time. It's not like some cool like ROTC programs or JROTC or something. Like it's hard. Like it's pretty heavy. Fight, die for the supreme leader kind of things. Fight and die for Russia. It's ultra nationalism. basically the same scenario that allowed for the rise of Hitler is essentially what has happened here inside of Russia. That's probably the best way to describe it. Very, very much Hitler Youth-like programs and stuff like that. It's not a ROTC program. It's not like a JROTC or anything where, no, these children are being taught at very young ages. And while as a child, I would have thought this was just the coolest thing, like as an adult and looking at this now, dude, I'm terrified. Like, it's not okay. They're being taught how to field strip machine guns and rockets and like rifles and the whole 9 yards, like legitimate boot camp stuff, like legitimate things you were taught for the military, not just like doing some drill and marching and about the rank structure and some the morals of the military code and that thing, and history and the Medal of Honor recipients and all that stuff. No, this is legitimately, hey kids, want to go toss hand grenades? Like, what? Like, as a kid, like I would have loved that because that's what I was interested in as a child. But like now, like looking back at it, like as an adult, it's like, hold up. You're telling me you're going to take my child and you're going to take them on a field training exercise for like 2 weeks, and you're going to have them in full military weapon, full military kit as a 10-year-old, and you're going to give them loaded weapons and like train them? Not okay. Not okay as a program. There's a lot of things that you can do, right? And, I don't have a problem with, like, JROTCs and stuff like that. Like, I think it's kind of dorky looking back at it now, like, because we had some of those people that went into the military and was like, I was in ROTC. That's great. Welcome to the real man's military. But that's extreme. They are extreme. Very extreme. Hitler Youthish extreme. Coming down here to St. Petersburg, what a lot of people are probably looking forward to tonight. And there was an explosion at a St. Petersburg cafe, which ended up killing a prominent pro-war military blogger. The explosion tore through the cafe in Russia's second largest city Sunday, killing a well-known military blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky. Tatarsky was a featured host of the weekly Khyber Front Z group meeting, and he was presented with a box by Daria Trepova. Women remained in the room as Tatarsky opened the box to reveal the golden bust of himself. Minutes later, a powerful explosion tore through the cafe, and 25 people were wounded in the blast. 19 of them were hospitalized. And so we can see them bringing the box there. And that is her actually leaving, or trying to leave. And she ends up getting pulled back to sit down. Keep in mind, this cafe is also owned by the Wagner Group. He has a lot of close connections with the Wagner Group.
Это политический кризис. Вот скажите, пожалуйста,
Настя, иди сюда садись. Садись сюда. Или вот сюда, куда ты хочешь. Давай в кресло садись. Да. Ух ты! Какой-то красивый парень. Это что, нет? Давай, ладно ты. Вот. Просто, золотой.
рабочая история.
Да, все, золотой Владимир. Отлично. Ну, ты знаешь, слава богу, я гораздо красивее. Да, ну тут просто кубики.
We can now see the explosion, which rocked the entire storefront. Yeah, he was confirmed killed, pretty much instantly by the Russian agencies.
Это охренеть. Это сейчас только что случился теракт. Выступал Владлен Татарский. Произошел взрыв в баре на Ваське. По-моему, нашему спикеру пришло. Людям пришло. Это ужас.
Something worth pointing out, these guys, as far as I can tell, I think these guys are Wagner. Looks like one of the newer Wagner patches. But you can see, obviously, lots of people that ended up getting injured. So the cafe is no ordinary destination, as I described earlier. It belongs to Yevgeny Prigozhin and was gifted to a group called Khyber Front Z. Khyber Front Z is a group of far-right influencers who meet every Saturday to strategize and organize crowdfunding for the Wagner Group and the Russian military. Prigozhin has commented on the explosion, saying, "Indeed, I gave the cafe to the patriotic movement Khyber Front Z. They held various seminars there. This tragedy occurred at the seminar. As for the death of Daria Dugina, yes, everything is similar. But I wouldn't blame the Kyiv regime for these actions. I think a group of radicals who are unlikely to have any connections with the government are acting." Vladimir Tatarsky, or Maxim Fumin, was originally from Makivka Donetsk region. He joined the Luhansk militia after escaping prison in 2014. He was serving a sentence for armed robbery and a murder. You have seen Tatarsky on our stream before, because this is him after Putin's speech.
Все, всех победим, всех убьем, всех, кого надо, ограбим. Все будет, как мы любим. Давайте с Богом. Все, всех победим.
Yep. Let's go and kill everyone and rob everyone. Yeah, definitely. And what do we know about the person who brought him the package? And her name is Daria Trapova. All we know so far is that she's an anti-war activist. Trapova's mother says she saw her dart shortly before the explosion on Sunday and that she didn't notice her behaving strangely. Russian Interior Ministry published a video of interrogation of Daria Trapova, and she admits to giving Tatarsky the figurine, but fails to explain who gave her the statue. I'll tell you later. The human rights project OVD Info has reported that Daria Trapova was arrested at an anti-war protest on February 24th, 2022, and Trapova was jailed for 10 days. Two of Trapova's friends told the independent outlet Agentstovo that she was opposed to the war in Ukraine and that she also didn't hold any radical views. Dmitry Rylov has also said his wife was framed.
Понимаешь, за что задерживала?
Понимаю.
За что?
За, я бы сказала, пребывание на месте убийства Владлена Татарского.
Что ты сделала?
Я принесла туда эту статуэтку, которая взорвалась.
А кто тебе передал эту статуэтку?
Можно я попозже расскажу?
Понимаешь?
And thank you to White Raven on our Discord who ended up submitting a bunch of the story there for us. You should jump down here into the Tuva region, the Tuva Republic of Russia, where just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, the Tuva Republic has announced that it will deliver 3,000 horses to the Russian army to help with logistical issues. They have run out of men, so they shall send their horses. We carry on with international news here, coming over to NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, where Finland, as of 3 minutes ago, at least here in the Eastern time zone of the U.S., has now become an official member of NATO. Finland will become a member of the Defense Alliance of NATO on Tuesday, April the 4th, 2023. The President of the Republic, Sauli Niinistö, will travel to Brussels and participate in the official joining ceremony organized by the NATO headquarters. Finland will deposit its instrument of accession to the North Atlantic Treaty to the U.S. government in Brussels on Tuesday, April 4th, before the start of NATO Foreign Ministers' meeting. Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto makes the deposit. The flag-raising ceremony celebrating Finland's NATO membership will take place at the NATO headquarters after the deposit of the accession document. So it is official as of 4 minutes ago now. NATO, now having been ascended by all 30 members of the alliance, is now a member of NATO. And the Russian border with NATO has now officially extended by 1,300 kilometers. We've been tracking this since it was first announced, and I would like to congratulate Finland on their ascension there into the NATO alliance.
I welcome the vote by the Turkish Grand National Assembly to ratify Finland's membership in NATO. All 30 NATO allies have now ratified the accession protocol. And I have just spoken with President Sauli Niinistö to congratulate him on this historic occasion. Finland will formally join our alliance in the coming days. Their membership will make Finland safer and NATO stronger. Finland has highly capable forces, advanced capabilities, and strong democratic institutions. So Finland will bring a lot to our alliance. All allies made a historic decision last year to invite Finland and Sweden to join our alliance. Since then, we have seen the fastest ratification process in NATO's modern history. All allies agree that the rapid conclusion of the ratification process for Sweden will be in everyone's interest. I look forward to also welcoming Sweden as a full member of the NATO family as soon as possible.
That is coming from NATO. And there you see it. The newest flagpole. It is up. It is ready to go. And it is waiting for Finland's flag to fly high above it. So once again, congratulations, Finland. You have successfully joined probably the strongest defense alliance that has ever been created. We come down here into the Middle East, where we have a couple of different situations ongoing. First of all, coming out of Homs, we see another major air raid by Israel. During the night of April 1st and 2nd, the Israeli Air Force carried out a major air raid. According to the reports, the targets of 4 air bases located in the province of Homs, ShamRocks, and T4, Dava, and Al-Qasira, were the Syrian air defense tried to counteract the Israeli aircraft, but it did not give much in the effect. We can see photos of the attacks there. Reportedly, continued strikes from Israel do continue even into tonight, and we are seeing reports that they are actually utilizing F-35 stealth aircraft to conduct these. That's not the only thing that Israel has been conducting. Unfortunately, the Israeli military once again attacked Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Israeli military tried to expel worshippers from Al-Aqsa Mosque. During the conflict, the soldiers opened fire and killed one man. Israeli security forces and the military are increasingly carrying out aggressive actions against both the parishioners of Al-Aqsa as well as other Palestinians. As we continue here, jump over here and into India. We're coming out of Barak. We see at least 5 people having been killed following lightning and severe weather. Heavy rains and thunderstorms have affected multiple regions in India, and it is reported that up to 5,000 lightning strikes within 30-minute durations in Basudevpur area of Barak. 5 have so far been reported killed. If you'd like some more information, AdishaBytes.com has more. Jumping down here into Africa, coming out of Tanzania, a Marburg virus outbreak has occurred. The Ministry of Health in Tanzania declared an outbreak of the Marburg virus disease on March 21st, 2023. As of March 22nd, 8 total cases have been reported, among which 5 have died. 2 of the cases were healthcare workers, one of whom has died, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has sent specialists to assist with the outbreak. Marburg viruses and Ebola viruses belong to the same filovirus family. Marburg virus leads to hemorrhagic fever and with a high case fatality ratio. Like some more, there's also, you can get some more there from the CDC website as well as CBS News. Outbreaks do continue in Mozambique as cholera has followed up there after Cyclone Freddy came through and ravaged the area. The ongoing floods have persisted for the past 5 weeks and have led to a major cholera outbreak. Near 20,000 cholera cases have so far been confirmed among 8 provinces in the country of Mozambique as of the March 27th. At least 31 people have died of cholera in the Zambezia province, and 3,200 were hospitalized between March 15th and March 29th. According to the data from the Ministry of Health, it has been reported that drinking water wells have been flooded with sewage contaminated water. A tropical storm killed 165 people in Mozambique, 17 in Madagascar, and 676 in Malawi. More than 530 people are still missing in Malawi 2 weeks later. Coming out of Burkina Faso, troops entered to film a boy's killing in Burkina Faso. Though the videos have surfaced online in February, Associated Press has done extensive investigation and found of the video and identified one of the boys who was murdered in Burkina Faso's security forces. Burkina Faso's military has denied responsibility for the killings, which are a potential war crime under international law. In past months, killings in Burkina Faso have grown under the junta led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who seized power in September. Until recently, Burkina Faso security forces have received military training and hardware from the United States and European Union. This is coming from the Associated Press, and it does say that we have graphic content warning there. So we're just going to go ahead and move on. Down here in Brazil, specifically the state of Acre, thousands have thus so far been displaced by floods and landslides. Heavy rainfall has continued to affect northwestern Brazil since March 23rd, leading to flooding, river overflow, and triggered landslides. 12,000 have so far been displaced since March the 30th. While in Ecuador, 17 have died following additional landslides that have been ravaging the area. A landslide occurred on March 26 following heavy rainfall and thunderstorms. According to Risk Management Secretariat of Ecuador, 23 died and 67 were missing as of March 31st. 38 were injured and 850 people have been affected, and 57 buildings have been destroyed now near Aloisi. In Nashville, Tennessee, we have quite the predicament ongoing. After recent situations, including a mass shooting, have flared up tensions between the different major parties. 3 Democrats are to be voted out for standing with their constituents. 3 Democratic lawmakers who took part in protests on the House floor of the Tennessee State House will face expulsion later this week. The 3 lawmakers were removed from their committee assignments and had their badges to the Capitol deactivated. Representatives Justin Jones, Justin J. Pearson, and Gloria Johnson, all a Democrat from Knoxville, are facing discipline after supporting protesters pushing for more gun control at the Capitol days after the Covenant school shooting. In a press conference Monday, Jones says Sexton is more focused on politics than addressing the last week's mass shooting. Quote, "We are members who are standing in the well telling our speakers and our colleagues that kids should not be murdered in school," Jones said. And rather than address that issue, the speaker has spent more time on Twitter this weekend talking about a fake insurrection than he did about the deaths of 6 people, including 9-year-old children. You see here photos from the protests there, right there on the House floor.
So what's going on here in Tennessee today? So 3 of us lawmakers who stood with our constituents demanding that they take action, and here the thousands of people gathered on Thursday talking about the crisis of mass shootings. We've been kicked off our committees as representatives elected by our constituents. Each of us represents 78,000 people, and our people are being silenced because they're kicking us off committees. They're threatening to take a vote to expel us today. Our member ID badges have been shut off. Our representative ID badges have been shut off. And this is not what democracy looks like. You know, we are elected to serve our constituents, and I'm the youngest Democratic lawmaker here, the most diverse district, and by shutting me down, they're shutting down the voice of my constituents. So this is one of my constituents, Ms. Brooks, whose family was hit, and you know, a victim of the Walk House mass shooting, and so we're here to speak for them, and they won't even let us speak for our people. They wouldn't let us talk on the floor. They shut our microphones off. They shut our voting machines off. We couldn't even talk about the issue, and so when we went to the well to force the issue, they called us insurrectionists and are now trying to expel us from the legislature.
And the resolution to expel them has gone onto the floor. Reportedly, a fight ended up breaking out there on the floor. we continue on here, and we get to the storms. So, to recap, we did not end up streaming on Friday because we actually live, in an area that is affected by these types of severe weather instances. April marks really the begin of the beginning of some of the most dangerous parts of tornado season inside of the United States. And unfortunately, we saw our first major outbreak of the year happen on Friday. Pretty severe weather outbreak. A very powerful storm system ended up unleashing almost all the way from the Canadian border all the way to the Gulf across the United States. It caused violent tornadoes and very severe thunderstorms across the U.S. The National Weather Service has confirmed at least 31 tornadoes across 9 separate states on Friday and Saturday. More than 28 million people across the South and Midwest were under tornado watch going into Friday night, and at least 32 people have been killed as a result of the storms, and dozens have been injured. President Joe Biden has declared parts of the country major disaster areas because of the storms, and the White House has announced Sunday that it would provide federal resources, including financial assistance. By the way, whenever you're seeing Twitter and you're seeing like a little Doge logo pop up here, that would be Elon Musk trying to conduct some pretty blatant market manipulation of Dogecoin. But you can see here, this is coming from NOAA's and the National Weather Service for the United States, their Storm Prediction Center. They provide predictions and outlooks for severe weather going out several days in advance, upwards of about 72 hours. And you can see here the red zone means pretty significant. There are different levels. There's 5 levels to them. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. High risk being 5. We can see here where those tornadoes were falling, and where the high zone was located. And as we get into other areas, and that continued on across the country. Confirmed tornadoes. So far, we have an EF3 in Bridgeville, Delaware, an EF3 in Marome, Indiana, or near Marome, Indiana, and Sullivan, Indiana. An EF3 in Hazel Green, Alabama, about 6 miles, or near Hazel Green, Alabama, and Huntland, Tennessee. An EF3 around Gas City, Indiana, and Arcana, Indiana. An EF3 near Spencer, Indiana, and Steinsville, Indiana. An F2 near Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, and Clifton, Tennessee. An F2 near Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Woodbury, Tennessee. An F2 near Oxford, Indiana, and Badger Grove, Indiana. An F2 near Martinsville, Indiana, and Morgantown, Indiana. An F2 near New Haven, Indiana, and Harlan, Indiana. An F2 near Simmons, Indiana, and Herbst, Indiana. An F2 in Jackson Township, New Jersey. An F2 Jackson Township, New Jersey to Howell Township, New Jersey. An F2 near Seagirt, New Jersey. An F1 near Wapakoneta, Ohio, and Waynesfield, Ohio. F1's near Hackleburg, Alabama, and Pebble, Alabama. One near Chapel Hill, Tennessee, and Eagleville. Colfax, Indiana, Frankfort. Huntsville, Tennessee, and Lafayette. Crimson, New Jersey, Moorestown, New Jersey, Rising Sun, Maryland. I mean, you can just see as it continues on down here. And I do know quite a few of these locations. I've been to them. So this coincides pretty close to some other major tornado outbreak events. Yeah, William Young says, if you live in that red area, have a basement. 100%. You do not understand the intense danger. To give you an idea, an EF0 will rip the shingles off. and F1 will rip the roof off, and F2 will rip the roof siding and possibly tear down your walls, and F3 is guaranteed to tear down your walls, and F4 will rip your house off and an F4 will rip the house off of its foundation and suck you out of it, and F5 will rip up will literally pick up the concrete that makes your driveway and parts of your foundation. The people that are the people that live in even higher risk areas than I do, a lot of them have specifically designed storm shelters, including in their homes, to survive an F5, because you can't just... One, F5s are extremely rare, don't get me wrong. The most you're likely going to see is an F4. F4s are still you can't imagine an F4 in your head. You can see pictures all you want, but an F4's devastation is... it's horrific. It's an act of God. I mean, there's nothing else to say. But you should have a plan. And this is why. This is why we canceled. Because we do live where I am at. We do live in this area. In these types of areas. And we were, very quickly, as I was watching and I was going through and preparing for all this, I'm very interested in this type of weather, severe weather and tornadoes and stuff anyway. It went from interest to realizing we are in the path of this. And that, there are, major cells that were happening. I was watching live feeds from storm chasers and stuff that were out there in the areas, tracking down these storms and watching the rotation and stuff. And I was watching the radar maps and stuff because I can read them not to a meteorologist's extent, but my brother was a meteorologist and taught me some things to look for. And I decided that it was best, as you notice, I wear headphones. These are very nice headphones. And so I would like to be able to hear the siren when it goes off. And I was wanting to pay attention to have a heads up, because if you live in these areas, the tornado siren is the very last line of warning you should have. You should be, if you know that there's really severe weather, you should have the weather station on. You should check the National Weather Service and be able to read, learn to look for these announcements, because we've actually had an incident here, and this happened, I believe, last year, that there was I believe they classified it as an F1 eventually, but either an F0 or an F1 that touched down and actually did pretty severe damage to a local farm that touched down right outside of town. And the weather station didn't pick it up. They missed it, and the sirens as a result didn't go off. So it should be the last line of defense. You should be paying attention to these things, and I thought it was much more important to pay attention to these things, so I canceled the stream. But it has been very horrific. Little Rock, Arkansas took a direct hit from a tornado. I do not know what that has now been classified as. But it is taken it took a direct hit. A lot of casualties out of that. So Little Rock here, where are you at, Little Rock? The north side of Little Rock, Arkansas, up here, going over Jacksonville in this area. This is where that tornado ended up touching down and caused some pretty significant damage, if you have seen the photos. Over by Davenport and Peoria, Illinois, had pretty significant systems. Whether talking about stuff dropping down here in like Gas City, Indiana and stuff, this is in this general area to the north of Kokomo. And then also down here south of Indianapolis, Whiteland, Indiana, reported that they had taken a pretty direct hit. In the National Weather Service survey teams are still going through damage to confirm tornado touchdowns and everything. It's not over. They're still surveying. Now, this brings me to a good point talking about looking at these things. I'm going to bring up NOAA Severe Weather Outlook. So this is the NOAA Severe Weather Outlook I was just telling you guys about. This is coming from the NOAA's National Weather Service. And this is their storm predictor. And this is the current one-day outlook. This came out, sometime earlier today. This is updated through April the 4th. So you're looking at 2-day weather outlook. So if you notice, we are expecting to get another outbreak again here. This is supposed to happen, later tomorrow through Wednesday and Thursday ish. So this is, if you are living in these areas, it is that time of year. So be cognizant of that. You can see here the exact same major areas that we were looking at, last week are going to continue. So please keep your eye if you are looking at the National Weather Service. I'll pull that one up too. Bring up my National Weather Service. I keep these at work running too, so that way I know I'm not sending my drivers into something dangerous. But if you get into you click on the National Weather Service, if you look them up and then you click on the NWS radar as opposed to going to the website and clicking on the radar, this is for low bandwidth. This is, I think, much better. If you click here, you can see obviously how everything moves. But if you actually click on it, are you not gonna? There we go. You can actually click on these locations and you can see there's a flood watch up here by Kalamazoo. If you go over here to Wichita, they have a red flag warning and a wind advisory. You can see these things and you can click on your county, on your area, and you can see what active things are there. And you can actually click on, if I have we'll click back up here. Let's go to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I don't know why it keeps doing this, but they're under a flood watch and a flood warning. So flood warning. Keep in mind the taco chart. A watch means we have the stuff to make tacos. A warning is we're having tacos right now. They have flood watch and flood warning, meaning that some areas need to be watching for flooding. Others are in a warning, meaning they are flooding right now. And if you click on that little link that they have under those alerts, you can read here. Flood warning, it tells you when it's valid. So it tells you when it came out, 4/3 at 10:52 Eastern time through 4:10 at 2000 or 8 p.m. Eastern time. And it tells you where it's at, when, what is the problem, where it's going to impact, and any additional details you might have or might want to know. So keep an eye on these kinds of things if you live in these areas. I want everyone to be safe when watching, and I would like to keep myself safe. So I think it's important knowledge to have. I think it's important. And if you are fascinated by these kinds of things, it's something you'd be looking at anyway. But, yeah, make sure, stay vigilant. Don't wait for the siren. You should know ahead of time if you feel that there might be a problem, or that you may be in danger. So keep an eye on it. Be vigilant. Listen. Pay attention to what's happening. And that is your last warning. That a siren going off very well could mean that the tornado is on the ground. So keep that in mind. We go over here and into New York, where there is a pretty big announcement. I think it's kind of important to note these things, and we've talked about quite a bit of these, but I have, luckily, and several other people here on the team have a lot of personal, relation to this. I have a lot of personal investment in this, whether knowing someone or having a loved one or both, and dealing with this a lot, and seeing what happens. And that is the fact that April is Autism Acceptance Month. Very big thing, and something that I think honestly gets very much underdiagnosed. Believe it or not, I think it does get very much underdiagnosed, especially for women and females. In general, I think it gets underdiagnosed. But this is National Autism Acceptance Month. It raises awareness for autism during April. Ultimately, the goal of Autism Acceptance Month is to be more inclusive in the very community it seeks to celebrate. It promotes not just education about the differences of people with autism, but understanding and respecting those differences. It calls for more tangible progress towards equal rights and resources. The autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain. People with ASD often have problems with social communication and interactions, and restricted or repetitive behaviors or interests. Some of these can be as simple as clicks. Some of these can be hyperfixation. And so if you take a look here, we can actually see, what is autism, and it's coming from here, from the Autism Society. Once again, you can see that there's different types of things here, whether it be clicks. And so some of the things that you want to look for is just kind of a little bit of educating yourself. There's still a lot of research to be done when it comes to autism, but there is stuff that we do understand. And a lot of it is a need for social interaction, but also understanding when distancing can be a very important thing. Overstimulation is a very big thing for people with autism. And you have to know when to respect those boundaries, but still be inclusive with people that have these types of, whether you want to call it disability or what have you. It's a lot of, there's a lot that we can do. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to associate with these kind of things, and it's not really the right thing to do. So be sure to educate yourself. There's a lot of great resources out there for you guys to go and check out. Of course, we are providing some here from the AAM, but also from the United Nations, which is, of course, always a great resource for you guys to have. And they are going through, and this is the world, specifically, Sunday was World Autism Awareness Day, with April being the Autism Awareness Month. So, highly recommend you guys go and read up and try to be a little bit more inclusive. And to finally wrap up the night here, we jump down into Cape Canaveral, Florida, where, of course, we go to the Space Force / NASA Center. It's so weird for me to say Space Force still. Where we actually have some updates regarding the Artemis missions. We watched Artemis 1 live. We actually stayed live just to watch that liftoff. And now we go to the Artemis 2 missions, where we find out that the astronauts have thus far now been revealed. Here's the crew rundown. And mission commander will be Reed Wiseman, who lived and worked aboard the International Space Station as a flight engineer in 2014. He also commanded the undersea research mission in Nemo 21, and the most recently served as the chief of NASA astronauts. So this is our mission commander for Artemis 2. Mission specialist Christina Koch, who took part in the first ever all-woman spacewalk. She will become the first woman to also orbit the moon. Pilot Victor Glover, the pilot for NASA's SpaceX Crew 1 mission. He logged 3,000 flight hours in more than 40 different aircraft. Mission specialist Jeremy Hansen. He was a fighter pilot before joining the Canadian Space Agency, and he will be the first Canadian astronaut to fly to the moon. And overall, these will be the first humans to fly towards the moon in more than 50 years. Artemis II's crewed mission around the moon is scheduled to launch in November of 2024. This mission will be a flyby. This will not be a landing. The object of the mission is to conduct a flyby around the moon, considering we haven't done it for, 50 years. It's kind of something we would like to try again. And so we're doing this. So Artemis 1 was so far a success in its mission. We now have a lot of the data to come back, make sure everything actually worked aboard the aircraft, aboard the spacecraft. Now we are going to be able to send a crewed mission out there to do a flyby of the moon. Artemis 3 will be the landing on the moon. So we will see a lot of awesome stuff coming out of there. So awesome to finally see and meet the crew that will be going up in the Artemis 2 mission. And unfortunately, it is in November 2024, but it is very highly likely we will be keeping up with the updates on that. And when that time comes, hopefully we'll be watching that live here as well. But with that, that is everything that is happening throughout the news in the world today, at least from our sources. I hope that you guys found this knowledgeable, if not enjoyable, and I do hope that you guys learned something out of this. In the meantime, I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Please remain safe, especially when we're talking about all the severe weather instances that are happening, and of course, all the other terrible situations happening throughout the globe, whether that's the war in Ukraine, different global climate issues, or natural disasters or conflicts. And if you can, please help the people that need this. The whole point of this channel is to be the news that goes back and to bring awareness to situations, to problems, societal issues, whether it be war, geopolitics, or what have you, but also to try and help the people that are affected by these issues. And so one of the biggest way you can do that is by supporting the wonderful organizations in the description below. 70% or more of the donations that receive go to their programs, with 30% or less going to things such as administration's costs. We also here at TNN have started our own initiative to supply non-lethal aid to Ukrainian forces and medical personnel inside of the country of Ukraine, which we are currently undergoing the fundraising for. So if you guys would like to join into that, please feel free to jump onto our website. It's also linked down there below, specifically the page for Operation Guardian support. And in the meantime, I hope that you guys, if you can't give a lot, can give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do is help us grow our impact. Those likes and subscribes and sharing it amongst your communities help us tremendously by reaching more people and to inform more people, bring awareness to these issues, and to ultimately have more people to come in and donate and help raise money and support the people and help the people that need it the most. But in the meantime, I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, aka a great Tuesday and Wednesday, and we will hope to see you back here at TNN on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. In the meantime, please stay safe and secure, and I hope to see you guys back then. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія духовно ваги і чудо кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно ваги і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. я до волновахи чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Після я до волновахи чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Після я до волновахи чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Ідіть нахуй.